Stephen Bonsu, and I'm a Microsoft Office Specialist Master. If you want to get to know more about me, you can check my LinkedIn profile. I will not be able to share my video now so that we can just focus on the content that we want to deliver today without any distractions. Now with me is also Samuel Mensah. He happens to be an analyst at Abramex Consults Limited. And he is also a proctor. Now, what do proctors do? Proctors oversee the Microsoft Office specialists and any certificate-oriented exams from our testing center. So he's also on this call to provide technical support during the training. I also indicated that we will be doing a lot of case studies. We'll run through our course outline, and we have a lot to actually do. Now, a few housekeeping rules. We'll expect all participants to mute unless they have a question. If they have a question, they can keep it in the chat area or chat box. We'll address them during the Q&A session. You can raise your hand if there's something urgent that you want us to address, and then we will take it up from there. But whilst the delivery is ongoing, we want to flow without any distractions at all. Now, for those that have been able to join now, it's 7:03 p.m. GMT in Ghana. And we have other international candidates or attendees or participants. So we also want to recognize that it is possible there are time zones or this time that we are using for the training may not be favorable for them, hence the recording. Now, we have about 4 of you on the call, and it will be fine to get you to briefly introduce yourself and then tell us briefly about yourself, and then we can just move, especially in terms of your expectations for the course before we jump onto the course outline. So starting from Amwako, I have Adi Amwako. You can unmute and then introduce yourself.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Adi Amwaku. So I'm expecting that by the end of the duration of this course, I'll be able to polish my skills already in Excel and get to do more than what I used to do. Yes, there are some few areas which that needs better polishing. So I want to polish the areas. So that's what I'm trying. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Next.
Okay, so I'm also Tony Usu, an accountant, and so I think I've been using Excel for quite a long time. I think looking at the course content was quite interesting. I hope that is going to sharpen my skills. So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
All right, thank you. Next. We have one Cassian on the call.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Kassian Ninga from Tanzania. I'm really glad to be part of this session. Basically, my background is a community development activities, and I've been involved in M&D activities for several projects. So thank you very much for having me on board.
Yeah, thank you very much for having you on as well. I'm sure for some of us who have not been able to join from the group, it may be as a result of the time zone differences. But once we have some of you on the call, it would still simulate the class environment or an environment for an online class like this so that it can be more interactive, and then others would enjoy it when they are watching the recording. So let me move to the course outline, and then let's quickly run through the course outline to get to know exactly what we are going to cover during this course. So Abramex Consult happens to be a professional services firm. We provide consulting and training to enhance people's professional development, and that is our mission. So we realize that the Microsoft Office Specialist Program is something that many of the industry players cherish a lot and will find a lot of value. So we set out to prepare and then deliver this course. Now, we sent a link to a video to give you an overview of the Microsoft Office Specialist Program. And I believe if you have watched it, you would get a sense of why this program is so valuable. And having a certification, sorry, and having a certification from Microsoft itself is very, very good. Now, on the Microsoft Office Specialist program, it has been evolving over some time now. I remember the first time that I took an exam was 10 years ago in 2014. So Microsoft Office Specialist has been here for some time now. And it is organized around the various suites: Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, Access, the Microsoft Office apps. And we have an associate level and an expert level in the various or in the current structure of the program. So we set out to get people to become Microsoft Office specialist experts. And the learning curve is a little bit steep. If you're not an associate, you find it a little bit difficult and challenging to be an expert. So the first step that we needed to take was to offer the MOS Excel Associate program to prepare participants so that we can further flatten the learning curve for people or for professionals to actually validate their spreadsheet skills. So if you look at the course overview, the course has been designed to prepare you for the Microsoft Office Specialist Excel Associate certification. Now, this certification demonstrates competency in the fundamentals of creating and managing worksheets and workbooks, creating cells and ranges, creating tables, applying formulas and functions, and creating charts and objects. Now, the exam covers the ability to create and edit a workbook with multiple sheets and use a graphic element to represent data visually. Now, workbook examples include professional-looking budgets, financial statements, team performance charts, sales invoices, and data entry logs. An individual earning this certification has approximately 150 hours of instruction and hands-on experience with the product, has proven competency at an industry associate level, and is ready to enter into the job market. They can demonstrate a correct application of the principal features of Excel and can complete tasks independently. Now, what is the takeaway from this course overview? The takeaway from this course overview indicates that the Microsoft Office Specialist Excel Associate Program is not an Excel beginner's course. You should actually come to the course with some background, some experience, some basics in Excel. And this can be seen from the objective domain. The objective domain has not been organized for a beginner. However, we get the sense that a number of you participating in this course, they happen to be beginners. They have some gaps, spreadsheet skills gaps that they need to fill. And that is why we wanted you to complete the skills assessment prior to joining this course so that we'll know exactly how to help fill in those gaps during the course. Now, if you look at the learning outcomes, we have 5. We've organized it according to the objective domain. So you're going to manage worksheets and workbooks. And then under that, you should be able to import data into workbooks, navigate within workbooks, format worksheets and workbooks, customize options and views, prepare workbooks for collaboration and distribution, manage data cells and ranges. Okay, that's the second module. So you learn how to manipulate data in worksheets, format cells and ranges, define and reference named ranges, and then you summarize data visually. Now, you also need to be able to manage tables and table data, where you create and format tables, modify tables, and filter and sort table data. Now, you also need to perform operations by using formulas and functions, where you insert references, calculate and transform data, you format and modify text. And then finally, you learn how to manage charts, create, modify, and format charts. So you can see from these learning outcomes, which is mapped around the MOS Excel Associate Objective domain, you can see that by the end of this course, you would have filled in a lot of gaps, and then you will be certification ready. Now, what is the approach that we are going to use during this course? Now, we will adopt a project-based learning approach. Now, we are going to take at least 3 case studies or projects that cover the MOS Excel Associate Objective domain. Now, we'll teach by example and engage you by learning by doing, using a step-by-step approach. Now, we will also introduce you to the official practice kit that simulates the final MOS Excel Associate exam. And in that, you will realize that you're going to have a lot of exposure in an exam environment to prepare you to take the exam. So that is the approach that we are going to use during this particular course. Now, because the objective domain does not cover Excel basics, we saw it important to fill in some gaps by providing you with what we call a technical orientation to Microsoft Excel. So you go to YouTube, you go to the various websites, you can learn Excel in one way or the other. But at this time, we are going to provide you with some tidbits, orient you in Excel in a way that you will never forget. Okay, so that's what we are going to do in the first session for today. Now, we will discuss what Excel is used for, whether Excel versions matter, and we talk about backward compatibility, and then we try to tour the Excel user interface, where we look at Excel features, workbook, worksheet structure, and then we talk about Excel cell referencing system. These are basics, but we realize that once we cover them, we will be able to move faster on other areas of the course. Now, we would undertake project number 1 today, which looks at sales and budgeting forecast. So I realize that some of you are accounting and finance professionals, and then you build financial models a lot. So we are going to use that opportunity to undertake a case study of a fictitious startup company that sells bottled water to customers. And then we try to prepare a sales and collections budget. Now, the appeal of becoming a Microsoft Office specialist is the extent to which you're able to apply the knowledge to various projects and tasks that you need to do using Excel. So in industry, Excel is the industry standard for financial modeling, planning, analysis, and reporting. You ask the accounting and finance professionals, and then they will tell you that. Okay, so we are not entirely assuming an exam orientation, but we also want to be able to apply the skill sets that we have actually garnered during the course. Okay. Now, by the time we are done with the first project, we would have covered about 40% to 50% of the objective domain. Now, the second project actually helps us to do what we call business intelligence, where we generate actionable insights from data. Okay, so we are going to have something like historical sales, which we're going to compare with the numbers that we have created in our sales and budgeting forecast. Okay, so at the end of the day, you get a second industry standard application of Excel, where we use it for data analytics and business intelligence to inform decision making. Okay, and then we also look at filling in a few gaps when it comes to some of the items on the objective domain. So we are going to create an employee database. We are making it a little bit simple to understand fundamental concepts so that we can take it to another level. Now, in terms of the logistics for this course, I'm using a Windows 10, a Windows 11, and then using Microsoft Office 365. So if you're going to take the exam, you will need to indicate the version that you want to take the exam in, and then you need to deploy that version of the Office suite so that you can use. Now, we're also going to provide you with some learning materials or practice files, and then you also have an opportunity to use the MOS practice kit. Now, this course is going to be 5 weeks, and it's going to be instructor-led like I am doing on Wednesdays and Fridays on Teams. And then we are going to do it at 7 p.m. and it's going to be between 2 to 3 hours. And the sessions will be recorded and shared with you participants. Now, you will be given assignments and projects during the course. And then to be able to measure the impact of the course, we will conduct a pre-test and a post-test assessment. So the pre-test is what you did on the skills assessment. We wanted to take it a step further by you having a feel of the exam environment. So you take the test, and then when you are done with the course, you also take the test so that we can measure the impact that we have made during this particular course. But I realized that some of you were not able to take it. So we will dispense with that, but we will be strict on it during the next cohort of the Office Specialist Program. All right. Now, this is actually the end. We also have our course coordinator or administrator by name, Jessilda Mensah, and I'm sure she's been engaging you on LinkedIn and also on the WhatsApp pages. So that is a brief overview of the course that we are going to undertake over the 5-week period. Now, this is the MOS objective domain, the official one from Microsoft. So you are going to be tested. So this is what we have actually summarized and then organized the course around so that you'll be able to do. Now, at the end of this session, I am going to share a checklist with you, and that checklist would help us to tick each of the skills that we may have covered or tasks that we may have covered in a particular project. Okay, so assuming that in a particular project, we import data from text files. Okay, now one of the things that we're going to do is that we would try to highlight that, or we'll try to mark that on our objective domain. So we're going to tick until we are finally done with the entire course. So let's please take notes of that. So this is what I am talking about. I am going to share a copy of this with you, okay? And then we are going to make sure that by the end of the 5-week period, we would have ticked each of the boxes so that we know that we have achieved the objectives of this particular course. So let's take note of that as well. All right. Now, I think it's about time that we can begin with today's case study, and then we can set the ball rolling. Okay. Now, within the next 1 or 2 minutes, let's see if any of you has a question that they want us to speak to or answer before we can proceed. Is there any question? Is there any clarification that you seek? If everything is clear, we'll move on to what we set out to actually do today. All right. Okay. So let's begin. Let's look at the course outline and then look at the first thing that we are to do in today's session. So we are going to provide a technical orientation to Excel. And over here, we are going to ensure that we would look at Excel and what Excel is actually used for. I believe you have already installed Microsoft Excel. So I am just going to take you through a step-by-step approach and then get you to understand Excel in about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we try to cover that so that you can understand the tool that we are going to use for the training. All right. Now, Excel is actually an app, a software developed by Microsoft. Now, historically, we have always had paper-based spreadsheets. If you ask the accountants, they'll tell you we have even that in elementary school. So way back in my elementary school, we had a maths workbook. Now, in that maths workbook, when you open it up, you will see that there are vertical lines and then there are horizontal lines. Now, those vertical lines and horizontal lines, when they intersect, they create small boxes that we use to store values. So primary school 1, 2, 3, we were used to grid lines, creating small boxes for us to store values. Now, accounting and finance, they've also been using paper-based spreadsheets for years now for their double entry bookkeeping. Then Dan Bricklin, Bob Frankston in the 80s, they came up with what we call the killer app. And then they created an electronic spreadsheet. So that electronic spreadsheet is what has evolved, and Microsoft happened to be one of the tech giants, also came up with a spreadsheet software called Excel. So what Excel is doing is it's a software for managing electronic spreadsheets. Now, to be able to use Excel, you need a PC. You need an operating system. I am using Windows 11. Now, if you want to use Microsoft Excel, you need to also install what we call the Microsoft Office suite. And technically, if you ask the IT guys, before you deploy Microsoft Office or you deploy Excel, you need to look at the organization that you are trying to deploy it for. And you need to do some technical assessments. Okay. When you go to your search engine and then you type in DXDIAG, DXDIAG, that's the keyword. When you type that, you initiate what we call the DirectX diagnostic tool, which provides you with the specs of your PC, your laptop, or whatever. Now, this is very important when you are deploying Microsoft Excel on a corporate level or on an enterprise level. Okay, you need to understand the specifications and the capacities that you need to deploy. Okay, so in this environment where we are doing business intelligence, data analytics, dealing with big data, we need to ensure that we have very high computing power. Okay, so you typically will need an i7 processor, okay, with about 16 gig memory, which I have here. And then you ensure that you have very good graphics, okay? And then you also need to look at the version of the operating system that you're using. So I'm using a 64 bits, and this is a factor when you are trying to install or deploy a version of the Office suite. So this is just something very important that you need to check before you deploy a Microsoft Office on a PC. So let's assume that we've gone through all these protocols, and then we have installed Microsoft Office. Now we want to start Microsoft Office. And then all that we need to do is to go to our Start menu, okay, or click on the Windows menu, or you can just go to the search engine and type in Excel. And then you click on it, and then you open the Excel application. Now, remember that this is the Excel application. So understand that there are you get to know that there are about 3 levels. We're looking at the application level, we're looking at the file level, and also we'll look at the components, the modules that we have in the file. So over here we have Excel. Excel is the application for managing the spreadsheets. Okay. Now, when you start Excel, the icon appears on the taskbar here. And then you are open to a start screen. On the left side, you have icons, or you have buttons that you can navigate here. When you get into Excel and then you come back to the File tab, it brings you here, and this is what we call the backstage view, or Office Backstage. Okay, it provides you access to file handling capabilities. So from here, you can create a file, you can open an existing file, okay, and then you can also save files in the cloud. So that is why this area is also very, very important. Now, when you come to Office Backstage, you also have access to the version and information about the Office suite that you're using. Okay, so if you're an IT person, you would want to know that the version of the Office suite that you're using, is it up to date? If there are updates, have you actually updated them? What version are you using? Okay, from here, you can also connect to accounts. If you're using a Microsoft 365 account, from here, you are also going to sign in so that you can use OneDrive or you can use SharePoint. Okay. Now, we also have Excel options. So from Excel options here, you have access to configuring the default settings in Excel. Now, on the Microsoft Office Specialist Expert program, there are so many default settings that you need to tweak here so that you will be able to get Excel to behave in a way that you would want to. So we can actually look at some of these default settings later so that we can tweak them and then use when we want to. Now, you can see that when I get to this area, okay, you can go to the File tab, which takes you back to the Backstage view, and then you see that there are some new tools that have been enabled, like the Info tab, Save As, Print, Export. All these have been enabled. Now, this is a little bit different from the Start screen, okay, but they all take you to the Backstage view. Now, here, I am going to close Excel so that you would understand what we mean by the application. So Excel is the application for managing the files. Okay, so don't see Excel as, from a technical point of view, don't see Excel as a workbook, basically. Excel is the application the software that actually manages the spreadsheets. Okay, and there are so many applications. We have Google Sheets, we have LibreOffice. Okay, we even have VisiCalc. They are all spreadsheets. In the olden days, we used to have Lotus 1, 2, 3. These are applications for managing electronic spreadsheets. So if you're able to understand that difference, that we have the application level and the workbook level or the file level, it really makes a lot of difference. And this is also very essential and useful when you want to do what we call Visual Basic for applications of Excel VBA. All right, now let me create a new workbook, a blank workbook, and then run you through the user interface. In the next 30 minutes or 25 minutes, we'll take a break so that you drink some water, pick a phone call, interact with your family, stretch a bit so that we can continue. All right, so at this point, I'm going to run you through the workbook structure. Now, Excel files are called workbooks. So just like an exercise book, you pick a book, you pick a notebook, you open it, and then you put content in there. Now, when you come to the File tab, where we have the Office Backstage, it gives you access to file handling capabilities, things that you do to the file, like creating, saving, opening, exporting, and all of that. But when you want to put content in there, you need to come to the worksheet view. So from here, Excel files are called workbooks. Now, every workbook has a name, and that name is displayed in the title bar. So by default, we have book 1, book 2, book 3 in that order. When you rename it, it appears in the title bar. Now, it is also very important to understand the file extension. This is very, very important. Now, Excel has a file extension, just like audio files have used MP3, video files use MP4, softwares use .exe. When you come to the Office suite, the files that we create have what we call file extensions. Now, Excel 97 to 2003, they have a file extension called .xlx. And then Excel 2007 to Office 365, they use the file extension called .xlsx. Now, these file extensions, they are very, very important. So this is also part of the technical orientation that we are giving you during this course. Now, Excel 97 to 2003, their file extension .xls tells you that we don't have another X here. What does the X in the 2007 to Office 365 or Excel 365 versions telling us? It is telling us that Microsoft has deployed a new programming language from 2007 called XML. And XML means Extensible Markup Language. Now, because of XML, it is now possible for us to take Excel and do more with Excel. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you to see. I am going to save this file as a .xls 97 to 2003 version, okay? On my desktop. Now you see that it is telling me that there are going to be some compatibility issues. Now these are things that will be tested on the exam. So when we get here, we are also going to cover some of these things. It's telling you that there are compatibility issues, and we'll get to that very soon when we are using the info tab. But now I have just saved this file as a 97 to 2003 version. And let me save that. Now, on the desktop, okay, Tony, I'll get back to you soon, so stay your question, or you can put it in the chat. I'll get back to you soon.
It's clear, sorry, it's clear.
Okay. Now, if you look at this icon here, it is different from the icon that I have here. Okay. So this is a new version of Excel. Now look at the two icons. This is an old 97 to 2003 version, and then this is the current version, Office 365 for 2021. Now, when I open this up and I press Control down arrow, as part of this course, you're going to learn a lot of keystroke shortcuts. Okay, so please take note of that. That makes you an expert. We're going to learn a lot of keystroke shortcuts. Now, when I press Control down arrow, it takes me to the last cell in the row. And that row is row 65,536. Now, when I press Control right arrow, it takes me to the last column, which is column IV. Now, when you go to the File tab, you go to Options, and then you go to Formulas, and then you switch on Working with Formulas, R1C1 reference style. Okay. Now it tells you that the column index for the last column in the version 97 to 2003 is just 256 columns. That is the end of Excel. Okay, that's the end of Excel. So it is limited. Now imagine that you work for MTN or you work for a telco and you're trying to import data from a file that contains over 1 million rows or about 500,000 records, or you're an accountant or you're a finance professional, you're working with data. Now we are dealing with big data and the data exceeds over 100,000. You will not be able to manage that in the 97 to 2003 versions. You would have to convert it. So you go to the info tab and then you convert this file. Once you convert it to the current version of the Office suite or the current version of Excel, now watch, you will see that we have rows numbering into 1,048,576. And then the columns are actually 16,384, just enough for you to do whatever you want to do, unless maybe you have data coming in as big data with high speed, high velocity, variety, volume, and all of that. But if you're using spreadsheets, because of extensible markup language, it is now possible for us to do what we call manage big data. So that is one addition or that one improvement. And then our recommendation, and on the exam, you are going to be tested using the current versions of the Office suite, 97 version 2021 or 365 because they have the current version of the Office suite, and because extensible markup language has been deployed in there. So please take note of that technical point that we have made regarding the file versions. Now, the next question that we want to ask has to do with, does backward compatibility matter? So, do Excel versions matter? Yes, they matter because of what we call backward compatibility. So what do we mean by that? So I am using a 97 to 2003 version, and then you are using Excel 2019. It means that we have different versions. Assuming we are in the same organization, and then we are actually collaborating, sharing files, reviewing files. Okay, sometimes when I'm building a financial model for a transaction, there can be so many revisions from the transaction team such that if you don't track, if you're not careful about the version that you share your files in, you can even have issues. I remember one instance where we were working on a transaction, and I shared a spreadsheet, like a model, a financial model built in Excel, to the transaction advisor. And then after doing that, what actually happened was that he was using um, Excel on a Mac. And because of that, certain features were not showing, or certain formulas were not calculating, because the functions that I had used were not available in Excel Mac. And it's the same thing. There are certain new functions that are available in the current version of the Office suite, but are not available in the older versions. They cause compatibility issues. Now, for a regulator, sometimes even the version of a file that you share for statutory compliance can make a difference. Okay, I remember one instance where a branch manager of a financial institution, okay, they had to fill in institutional statistics on a periodic basis. Now, what happens is that the files from the central bank or the Bank of Ghana has been shared in a 97 to 2003 version and placed online. You may be wondering that why don't they use the current version? Now, imagine that those that you are seeking to comply with the dictates of the law, okay, if they don't have the money to deploy a very current version of the Office suite, and for that matter, they are not able to fill in and complete a document that you have shared for them to fill in for their statutory compliance, you may be experiencing issues with the compliance. So backward compatibility really matters, and it is something that an MOS, a Microsoft Office specialist in Excel or in the entire Office suite needs to take care of or needs to consider when they are trying to collaborate on files in the Office or globally or internally. Anytime you are sharing files, you need to consider that the other person that you're sharing the file with may have some compatibility issues. Now, these are the key things that we want to talk about when we get to the Excel file and the Excel versions. Now, the next point that we need to drive home has to do with the components, the elements in a workbook. Now, we've seen that the workbook has a name and has a file extension. Okay, now another thing that we see spreadsheets having happens to be what we call sheets. Now, when you open an older version of Excel from, let's say, 97 to 2010, when you open Excel, you are met with 3 sheets by default. So if you don't need sheet 2 and sheet 3, you can delete them. But from 2013, we have 1 sheet when you open Excel, and you have a plus sign to actually add more sheets, as many as you want to, depending on the limit that your computer memory or your RAM would impose on that. So workbooks contains sheets. Now there are 2 types of sheets. We have the worksheets, and then we also have another one we call a chart sheet. Okay, so this is what I mean by a chart sheet. So assuming that I have this data, okay, and then let's say I have a product here, product 1, products 2, 3, and then let's say that I have 20, I have 100 here. Let's change this to, let's just keep it this way. Now, I can create a chart very easily like this. Okay. So I have created a chart here. Now, I can move this chart into what we call a chart sheet. So this is what I am referring to as a chart sheet. Okay, so let's understand that there are 2 types of sheets in a workbook: a worksheet and a chart sheet. So a worksheet comes with the grid lines. A chart sheet comes with a chart. So there are 2 types of sheets that can be housed in a workbook. Now, a workbook can also contain certain elements like macros. I don't know if you've heard about macros. If you know about macros, those that do a lot of development and VBA in Excel, macros are actually snippets of code. So Excel is able to do ABCD, but you can use the ABCD to create more words. Okay, you can use the alphabetical system to create so many words. So Excel has used VBA to give you something more like an alphabetical system. And then they have created some words for you. But you can take the words further by creating your own commands. So we have copy and paste. We have so many commands on the ribbon. Now you can also go into Excel and then create what we call macros. And those macros help you to take the limits of Excel to the next level. So this is what we are referring to as macros. Okay, and then we talked about chart sheets. All right. Now, let's talk about a worksheet, the structure of a worksheet. And then let's do some justice with some things or some few gaps that you need to fill in. And these are not covered on the MOS program, objective domain, because it is assumed that you have them. All right, now, when you pick a sheet, so look at the hierarchy. We have the application level, which is Excel, and then we have the workbook level, or the file, which is the workbook, the file level, workbook level, and then we have the worksheet level. So now we are at the worksheet level. Okay, so let me application level. We have the workbook level. And then we also have the worksheet level. Now, with the worksheet level, we want to explain that a worksheet contains what we call cells. So we contain what we call cells. Whiteboard level called sheets, and here called workbooks. Okay. I didn't want to spend a lot of time doing slides because we want to focus on Excel and nothing else. So this is what we call a cell. A cell is the box that you see in the spreadsheet. Now, Excel files contain worksheets, and the worksheets contain cells. Now, a cell is the intersection of a column and a row. Now, let me revert to the normal referencing style. So, a cell is the intersection of a column and a row. Columns are identified by letters and rows are identified by numbers. So when column E and row 5 intersect, they create what we call a cell. Now, please take note of whatever we are talking about here. I know some of you know these basics, but we are trying to fill in some small gaps so that we can move faster. Now, technically, a column is also a collection of cells from top to down. So when we say column E, cell E1, E2, E3, E4, E5, E6, they are all part of that column. And when we want to create very robust formulas, we can use what we call row references. Okay, so this is very important. We will be looking at cell referencing, relative referencing, absolute referencing, mixed referencing, sheet referencing. So I really need you to understand these basics very, very well when it comes to Excel's referencing system. So I know you may have a working knowledge of it, but please try to understand these basics very well. So a cell is the intersection of a column and a row. Columns are identified by letters, rows are identified by numbers. Now, the intersection of a column and a row gives you the cell. And every cell has an address. So that's what we call the cell address. So the cell address is the combination of the column letter and the row number. Column letter and the row number, they give you a cell address. Now, that cell address is displayed in what we call the name box here. So that's what we call the name box in the upper left corner beneath the command system. So this is it. We've explained that a column is technically cells from top to down, D1, D2, D3, all the way down. Rows are also cells from left to right. So when we say row 5, we are looking at all the cells from A5, B5, C5, D5, all the way to except D5. They give you the collection of cells in a row, and that is technically what it is. If you're able to understand these elements, they make it very easy for you to understand what we call relative referencing, absolute referencing, and then mixed referencing. Once you understand the cell system very, very well, it makes it very easy for you. So we've talked about columns, we've talked about rows, and then we've talked about cells. So let's take note of that. Now let's move to one of the next important item that you need to know. And then we're going to talk about keeping an eye on the active cell. Now, there are so many reasons why Excel has a number of limitations, okay? And because of that, it's not a very good RDBMS. So RDBMS, when we say RDBMS, we are referring to a relational database management system. It is because of the active cell. Now, this is the active cell. When you select a cell, and then you see the border around it, that green border, in Excel 2010 and previous versions, it used to be black. Now, this is what we are referring to as the active cell. Okay. Now, anytime you select the active cell, you see that the column letter and the row number will be highlighted. So that is the active cell. Now, there are 3 tools for keeping an eye on the active cell. Now, the 3 tools for keeping an eye on the active cell is what we call the name box, the formula bar, and the status bar. Okay, what is the name box? So this is the name box. The name box tells you the cell address of the active cell. Should I even select all these range of cells? Okay. It still tells me that this is the active cell. Okay, so the active cell is what it keeps moving. So you always need to keep an eye on the active cell. Now, another tool for keeping an eye on the active cell is what we call the formula bar. So this entire bar here is called the formula bar. Now, why do we call it the formula bar? We call it the formula bar because anytime we have a formula in there, it gives precedence to showing that. So let me demonstrate that for you to quickly see so that you can understand. So let's say that I have, I'm trying to create a simple revenue model, P&L. So let's say I have revenues here. I have expenses. And then I have, okay, let's even make it cost of sales. And then let's make this gross profit. Okay. Now this is the example that I've always been using for about 10 years now. And then we put here 4,000. Now, when I select this, the formula bar tells me revenue. It tells me cost of sales, tells me gross profit, tells me that I have a number in there. So it can display text and numbers. Now, when I put in a formula here, 10,000 minus 4,000, I have 6,000. Now look at it. When I select B1, it tells me that the content is 10,000. B2, the content is 4,000. But on the face of the spreadsheet, B3 says 6,000. But I don't see 6,000 in the formula bar. I rather see the formula that helps to compute. So for the auditors, okay, those that do financial audits or accounting audits, they often do a lot of model review, okay, or they often do a lot of spreadsheet review. And then one of the things that they want to know is where are the landmines? Where are the hidden formulas? Because when you mess up with the formula, you can end up messing up the entire template. Okay, so you always want to know where formulas are so that you can always keep an eye on it so that you don't overwrite it. So the reason why it is called the formula bar is that anytime there is a formula in a cell, it will give precedence to that. It will show the formula instead of showing the result or the value on the face of the spreadsheet. So this is something that we need to really understand. Now, the next thing is the status bar. Okay, now the status bar tells you the mode of the active cell. Now look at it. This is the status bar, the entire rectangular bar beneath the spreadsheet. In the corner, we see that it is in ready mode. Okay. Now, when I double click this, you see that it enters edit mode. When I begin to double click to type, it enters the enter mode. When I am inserting a formula and I begin with the equal sign and I click, it tells me that I'm using the point and click mode. Okay. So the status bar tells you the mode of the active cell. Now, when the status bar is not showing ready, there are times when commands on the ribbon may be grayed out and you will not be able to access them because the status bar is not showing ready. And you press the escape key on the keyboard to ensure that you are in ready mode. Okay, so we will be pressing escape key anytime we have a problem with our spreadsheets, and then we'll be able to resolve that. So these are the 3 key tools for keeping an eye on the active cell: the name box, the formula bar, and the status bar. Now, the status bar also gives you some numerical indicators. In mathematics, we add from top to down, and we verify from bottom to top. Okay, so you may have inserted a formula here to quickly give you this figure. Now, assuming that I made an error here, okay, and then I put in a formula here, I should be getting 60,000, but I'm getting 40,000. When I highlight this, the status bar can also give me the sum, the count, the average, and some numerical or statistical indicators. Okay, so the status bar also helps you to quickly do back of the envelope calculations, verify figures by highlighting them without even needing to put in a formula or a function. So this is also a very important tool that we need to keep an eye on. So we've talked about the name box, the formula bar, and the status bar. Now, before we go for our break or take any questions, we want to talk about the mouse pointer. The mouse pointer is very important. So when we look at the mouse, we have the mouse pointer. As Excel specialist, you need to know this. The mouse pointer is area sensitive, and the shortcut menu is also area sensitive. Okay, it's area sensitive. So what do we mean by that? Now, when I select a cell, the mouse pointer becomes a white cross. When I position the mouse pointer on the lower right-hand corner, it becomes a thin black cross. It means that I want to fill cells down. When I position the mouse pointer on any of the borders, it becomes 4 directional arrows telling me that I want to move the cell content. When I double click, the mouse pointer becomes an eye, a cursor, or an insertion point. When I move it on the column header, it becomes a down arrow. When I move it to a row header, it becomes a right arrow. When I move it to the ribbon, it becomes a pointer. What's the key takeaway? The mouse pointer is area sensitive. Now, the shortcut menu, anytime you right-click your mouse, you're going to see what we call the shortcut menu. The shortcut menu is also area sensitive. It gives you shortcut to commands on the command system. When I right-click the mouse pointer, I see a menu that is different from when I highlight and then right-click a column header. I also have a different menu here. When I right-click a sheet tab, I have a different menu here. Okay, when I right-click the ribbon, I have a different menu. The key point is the mouse pointer and the shortcut menu, they are all area sensitive. All right, Now, the next point that we need to drive home is the keyboard. So the keyboard is also an input device, and that is where we are going to do a lot of keying in. In advanced Excel classes, we disable your mouse so that you use the keyboard because it makes you more efficient, okay, by using keystroke shortcuts. So we are going to use a lot of keystroke shortcuts in whatever we are going to do to select columns, select rows, and then do more. Now, one of the things that helps you to enable keystroke shortcuts is what we call the ribbon mode. When you enable the ribbon mode by pressing the Alt key on the keyboard. So when you press the Alt key on the keyboard, you have certain numerical indicators appearing on the ribbon. So the ribbon is Excel's command system. Commands are grouped under tabs. So when I go to the Home tab, I have the clipboard group, the font group, the alignment group, the number group, the styles group, the cells group, the editing group, sensitivity group, add-ins group. When I go to the Insert tab, I have the tables group, controls group, charts group, sparklines group, filters, links, and comments. As a specialist, you need to be able to navigate the ribbon to know where commands are actually placed. So commands have been grouped under tabs. So if you pick a tab here, like page layout, you see groups of commands that are related, and you need to understand how to use that. We've already talked about the backstage view. Anytime you select the file tab, it takes you to the backstage view. There are also what we call dialog box launchers. When you go to the lower right-hand corner of a group, you can click it and then it will enable what we call the format cells dialog box. On the Excel Specialist Associate exam, you would be required to select or configure your formatting using the format cells dialog box. So you really need to know where it is located, and then you can also have access to it. Okay, and then we also have the ribbon, the quick access toolbar, which sits above the ribbon. You can add any kind of command to it, commands that you use often, and then they appear here. You can show it below the ribbon. The quick access toolbar appears here, and then you can also show it above the ribbon. Now, when you press the Alt key, like we said, it helps you to actually navigate and then use keystroke shortcuts. So if I want to use page layout, I'll press the P corresponding to that. And then I would also, let's say if I want to go to print titles, I can select I and then it's activated. So if I do Alt EI, automatically the page setup dialog box appears. So that's how you can learn keystroke shortcuts without stressing. So in a capsule, the technical orientation or introduction to Excel that we wanted to provide was that we want to let you know that Excel is a spreadsheet application for managing electronic spreadsheets developed by Microsoft as part of the Office suite. Okay, we have different versions of the Office suite. We are going to use the most current version, Excel 365, with the .xlsx file extension because of extensible markup language. And then we've also indicated that backward compatibility really matters because of the Excel versioning. If you're collaborating, sharing files, you need to know the version that the other Excel user is using so that you can avoid compatibility issues or manage them. We've also seen that at the application level, we have Excel. Excel manages workbooks. We've talked about it. And then in the workbook, we have two types of sheets, worksheets, and then we have chart sheets. And then we've demonstrated that. And then we also talked about the worksheet level. At the worksheet level, we have cells. The intersection of a column and a row gives you a cell. Columns are identified by letters, rows are identified by numbers. the combination of the column letter and the row number gives you the cell address. And then Excel takes in input through the active cell. You keep an eye on the active cell by using the name box, the formula bar, and the status bar. The name box tells you the address of the formula bar tells you the content of the active cell, and then gives precedence to formulas anytime they find them in there. And then the status bar tells you the mode of the active cell. And then we wrapped up by saying that the mouse is area sensitive and the keyboard, and it's an input device, and we use keystroke shortcuts to show efficiency during our use of Excel. All right, we are going to pause here and then see if there are any questions. If there's any feedback, we want to take it, and then we can come back in about 15 minutes time, and then we continue. Is that all right? Welcome back to the second half of the session. We are going to jump onto our case study because we have a lot of things to cover. We really want to be on the dots with our time. Now, the first half was just to give you a quick overview of Excel so that we can make time to do the core of the course that we're doing. So I'm going to use 5 minutes to talk about the case study, and then we would jump into it and then take it step by step. So this is the sales and collections budget that we have created. And if you are into accounting and finance, you know that budgeting is a very, very important planning tool. Okay, if you want to plan and you also want to have a baseline to control performance, a budget is one of the that we use. Now, there are so many different types of budgets. And one of the budgets that we know at the corporate level, we call the master budget. So the master budget is actually part of the annual budgeting process. At the end of the year, before the year ends, we know that we have the budget ready for it to be deployed or rolled out in the upcoming year. Now, a key component of the master budget is the operating budget. Okay, and that operating budget also has another key component, which is the sales budget. So typically, sales drives everything in the organization. So we carefully choose this example to give you, to touch on a very important application of Excel for budgeting and a specific area that is of relevance to you practitioners. So we want to look at this particular case study and then see how we can use one stone to kill 2 or 3 birds. So the first stone, the stone is going to kill 1 bird. So that bird is the MOS objective domain. So whilst we are developing this gradually, you see that we'll be covering SIPnets or certain specific objective domains, and then we'll be taking them up until we are done with the 64 items on the objective domain. So we'll take them one after the other and then take it step by step. So that's the first bed that we want to kill with the stone that we are using. Now, the second bed that we want to kill is to give you the opportunity to practice. Okay, so we want you to practice whatever we're doing, and then you'll be masters of Excel. And then the third bed we want to kill is that we also want you to be able to apply some of the things that we are learning, even at the strictest level. So this sales and budgeting forecast that we're going to do right now, or budget that we're going to do right now, you can even apply it to your own private company or to whatever you're already doing. You can follow the best practices that we talk about, and then you find a lot of relevance to it. So let's jump right in. So we have a fictitious company called Abromex Industries Limited. And this company, initialed AIL, they sell bottled water in commercial quantities. Now, I was looking for something that we are all familiar with, and then I realized that we all drink water. So bottled water is something that comes very easy to us. Now, this is actually AIL is something more like a retail company. So they distribute, they happen to be either distributors, you can call them retailers, depending on how you see it. They have different brands of water, and then they have it in different sizes, and they have different prices for each of the bottles. And then they try to do budgeting on a quarterly basis. Now, AIL sells 60% of its inventory of the bottled water in cash to its customers, and then 40% on credit. Okay, so what that means is that they are going to, if you look at their sales composition, we're going to have cash sales and we're going to have credit sales. And then we are to collect the sales that are on credit within 30 days. So we need to prepare a sales and collections budget, make it ready for printing and sharing, whether in PDF or in print format. And then we ensure that the sales and collections budget contains 4 key components: a unit sales and price budget, a sales composition budget, a cash collections budget, and an accounts receivables budget. And for you accounting and finance professionals that you have joined the call or who will watch the videos later, you see that we are actually applying a financial modeling standard in this particular training. And I often use some of these financial modeling and spreadsheet principles, standards, and practices or best practices for my consulting engagements or when modeling projects and transactions. So you are really fortunate to also have some of these tidbits if you don't already have them. All right. So now that we are done looking at the case study, let's jump right in and then take it step by step to be able to build our spreadsheet from ground up. All right. Okay. Now, on my desktop, the first thing that I am going to do, okay, is a best practice, because all the things that you are going to do here are actually best practices that I want you to actually add to your skill sets. So we're going to take it step by step. The concepts may seem a little bit simple, but they are very powerful. It's the same thing that we do in practice. Okay. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do as a best practice is to create a folder. So how do we create a folder? This is not on the objective domain, but it is assumed that you already know it. So that is where we are starting from. So I'm going to create a folder. How do I create a folder in Microsoft in Windows? I press the right arrow key to display the shortcut menu, which is area sensitive. I hover the mouse to new, and then I position it on folder. So I have created a folder. Now, I am going to name this folder as AIL. If you cover listed companies as an equity research analyst or as a financial analyst, you understand that companies have ticker symbols and they are very useful when they are trying to label them. So I'm going to call Abromex Industries Limited as AIL. Now, what have I done? I have just applied a file management best practice where you try to organize your files by folders. I have also applied a naming convention, and my naming convention is to represent the company or the client or the project that I am trying to create a spreadsheet for with their initials or their ticker symbol. So this is very important. As a spreadsheet specialist, we shouldn't see your desktop scattered with so many files, copy one of copy two of copy one of copy three, without any consistent file naming policy or convention. So these are some of the basics that we teach during our corporate trainings. You need to understand how or the need for you to create folders to organize your files. All right. Now I open the folder by double clicking it to open the folder. Now, traditionally, you want to start your Excel by going to the Start menu, and then you go to Start menu, you look for Excel, you open it, you go to blank workbook. After putting in some content, you go to File, you go to Save As, and then you save it. It is long, okay? It is very, very long, and I will not recommend this approach. The approach that I want to recommend during this course is for you to use the shortcut menu to create your spreadsheet files. So go into the folder, or you right-click the mouse, you go to New, and then you select Microsoft Excel Worksheets. Now, what is the advantage of doing or creating your files this way? The first advantage is that it is easier and it's more efficient. You don't have to go through long, winded steps to create a spreadsheet file. So this is very easy and very efficient. Now, the third thing, apart from easiness and efficiency, is that it prompts you to apply your file naming convention early in your file management on your spreadsheet or workbook management. So at this point, I am going to give my spreadsheet a file name. I'm going to call it AIL, okay? And then type in sales and collections budget. And then I'm going to add a file version 01A. There are even times that you can indicate that the file is unaudited. So look at the keywords that I have added to my file. This file tells me the subject matter of the file, sales and collections budget. It also tells me the organization whose file I have created. It also tells me the file version. So the next version may be 01B, 01C, all the way to 01Z before I get to 02A. If you look at some of the models that we built and the versioning that we go through in the reviews, there are times that you can get to 08B or E. Okay, because there are other reviews and it helps you to track information as they go through the audit trail. Okay, when the file is audited, is reviewed by an independent person, then you can change the status of the file to audited. If it is a draft, you can indicate if it has been reviewed, you can add that keyword to it. So the key point here is that create your file using the shortcut menu and then apply your file naming convention. Once you apply your file naming convention with underscores, with spaces, or with dashes, you ensure that you are good to go. So it's easy, efficient, and then helps you to apply your file management policy. How do we open a workbook? So you just double click the file and then it opens. Very, very easy without stressing. And when you open the file, we said that the file name will show in the title bar of the file of the Excel application. Okay, now the next thing that we want to cover is to rename a sheet. It used to be part of the objective domain, but it has been taken out because it has been added to the basics. An Excel specialist should know some of these things before taking the exam. So they are not part of the objective domain, but you should be able to name your spreadsheets or your sheets consistently. So I am going to right-click my mouse, the Sheet tab, and then I am going to select Rename, and then I'm going to call this one blank. So that's how to rename a sheet. All you need to do is to right-click your mouse or right-click the Sheet tab. You go to Rename, and then you type it in. You can also double-click, make it active, and then type it in like this. Okay. You create a file, you name it, you open it up, and then you rename your sheet step by step in a very consistent manner and structured manner. Now, the next thing that we are going to do, which appears on our objective domain. So if you pick your objective domain and then you look at objective domain number 7, objective domain number 7. So this one. So if you look at objective domain number 7, I'll share what I have numbered with you later on. So objective domain number 7 says that adjust row height and column width. This is tested on the MOS program, MOS exam. So at this point, I'm going to show you when it is proper for you to adjust column rows and heights. Now, in our sales and budgeting podcast that we want to do, we want to introduce structure into our spreadsheets by defining the column usage. So we want to define the use of the column. So we have columns A all the way to column XFD. We need to define each column in this particular spreadsheet. So column A is going to be for main headings. Column B is going to be for subheadings. Column C is going to be for subheadings. And then column D is going to be for plus or less. You get to understand each of them as we apply or use them. Then we are going to have our line items here. We're going to have our constant. We're going to have units of measurement. We're going to have row totals. We're going to have a blank spacer. And then from column J onwards, we are going to have our time ruler. Now, you may be confused at this point, but to give you a glimpse of what we would end up doing, the same project that we are doing is going to turn out nicely like this. So we are going to structure our spreadsheet and then arrange it nicely. And then we have our sales and collections budget in here. These are some of the things that we do in financial modeling when we are modeling the various transactions. So rest assured that whatever we are doing, once you understand it, you can replicate it, you can do it, and even apply it to whatever you're doing. And we've also structured it such that we'll be able to cover the items on the objective domain. So we have main headings, subheadings, sub-subheadings, plus or less, line items, constants, units of measurement, row totals, blank spacer, and then the time ruler. Okay. Now, objective domain number 7 is saying that we should be able to adjust row height and column width. So how do you adjust the column width? And how do you adjust the row height? Now, columns have width, so you can widen it, you can make it smaller. You can even position the mouse pointer here to double click it to auto adjust the width, the column width. But now we want to set specific measurements for the columns. Now, column A all the way to column D, we want to set their width to 0.75 points. So we right click the mouse. So all you need to do is to select the columns, right mouse, hover the mouse to column width, and then the column width dialog box would appear. From the column width dialog box, you type in 0.75 and then you press OK. So it has adjusted the column width to 0.5. Now let's do it again for column E. So we select column E, we right click it, we go to column width, and then we set it to 40 points. So that is where our line items are going to be. Now we select column F all the way to column XFD. So we can hold the shift key and then we drag all the way till we get to XFD. But can we be doing this? So there's a keystroke shortcut for doing that. You select the column and then you press Control Shift right arrow, and then it will select the last non-empty column in the spreadsheet. Control plus Shift plus right arrow. We want to set all of these columns to 12 points. So we select it again, Control Shift right arrow, and then we can right click it, and then we set the column width to 12 points. So what have we learned? We've learned how to select a column and adjust the column width for a single column and for multiple columns. These are all tested on the MOS program, objective domain number 7. So we are going to take that on the objective domain. Now we are going to set column I to 2 points. So we set it to 2 points, and then we have our structure in place. Column row 1. So we have columns and then we have rows. Rows are identified by numbers. So row 1 is where we are going to have the title of our spreadsheet. So we need text that is bigger than any other text. So we are going to right click, and then we will modify the row height. So column width and row height. So we are going to set the row height to 26.25. 26.25. Later, when you're watching the video, you can also duplicate and follow through to do the same thing. And then it becomes part of muscle memory. So I have configured, set up something more like a template, a structure that I would use consistently across my spreadsheet. Okay, so that is one of the principles and best practices when it comes to financial modeling, and especially the modeling standard that I subscribe to. Structure is everything. Create a template and then consistently duplicate the sheets across the entire model, and then you are good to go. Okay, so now that we've been able to adjust row height and column width, the next thing that we are going to do is to modify the font. So we want to modify or configure font, configure alignment, so that when we are modeling, we won't spend time doing those things every now and then, because we've already set at a global level. We've already done the global settings and we don't have to waste time. That's the essence of creating a template. So the first thing that we are going to do is that we are going to choose a consistent font type across our model. Now, one of the, apart from preferences, one of the font types that is often used in modeling is the Arial font. So I am going to select the entire sheet. To select the entire sheet, you hover your mouse pointer to the upper left corner, and then you select it. Or you can press Ctrl A. If you have text in there, Ctrl A will select the text. Now, when you press Ctrl A again, it will select the entire sheet. When I select this area and press Ctrl A, the entire sheet is selected. But when I select a data region and I select Ctrl A, press Ctrl A, it selects the data region first before another Ctrl A will select the entire sheet. So I'm going to apply my Arial font. So let's scroll down and select Arial. So I've selected Arial. Now, the next thing that I need to do is to define the font size. The font size. So the font size I'm going to choose here is 10 points. So I've chosen 10 points. So I've set the font type and the font size. Now, my columns, the columns have been defined as main headings, subheadings, sub-subheadings, and plus or less in that order, because when you have defined your column usage, it makes it very easy to format information or to format cell content. For instance, if I were to put product category here, and then I have product 1, product 2, and product 3. Because this is a heading, I will want to bolden this one. So what I have to do is to go directly into the cell and then apply the bold formatting here, because I don't want the bold formatting to be applied to the various products. If I have a segment, or let's say a geographical area where I sell these products, let's say north, south, east, west, I'll have to come here and then apply the bold to only this. So imagine that you have about 15, 20 blocks of content in a particular column. You need to be going into the cells one after the other to be able to format the individual cells. Now, that is what we are trying to avoid by splitting every data type into a specific column. So now look at what happens. When I put, let's say, product category here in column B as a subheading, and then I put product 1 here all the way to 6. And then I also have, let's say, geographical area where I have north, south, east, and west. All I need to do is to select column B and then apply my bold format. And then automatically, every text in that particular column is highlighted. Should I even add customer segments? Automatically, it's also formatted. The other advantage is what we call navigational efficiency. Navigational efficiency. So using this column defined or this column structure, I can use my control up arrow to navigate between sections of my model. And that is why we want to recommend that we use this column structure. It makes formatting easy, and it also enables navigational efficiency. Now, the formatting that we're going to apply is that columns A and B are going to be boldened. So we are going to bolden anything that we enter into column A and B. Now, column A and B, main headings, subheadings, and then for column C, we are going to have an underline for subheadings. So imagine that you're an accountant, okay? And then you are with us, and you're trying to create your statement of financial position. Column A is going to be something like this: the statement of financial position. Now you move to column B, and then you have assets. Okay. And then you have another subheading called non-current what? Assets. And then column E now houses your line items. So property, plant, and equipment. So PP&E, intangible, tangible assets, maybe your deferred tax assets, and then your non-current assets. Now you move ahead back into column C, you put there your current assets, where you have something like inventories, accounts, receivables, and then you have, let's say, your prepaid expenses. Then you have your cash and cash equivalents. Now you have your current assets as a total here. So current assets. Now, the sum of non-current assets and current assets gives you total assets. Now you're moving to another element. So the other element that you're moving to now you go back to column B and then you put in your liabilities as another element. Then your non-current liabilities will follow, where you have things like your borrowings, and then maybe your finance leases, okay? And then you have non-current liabilities. Okay, you come back to current liabilities, and then you have your accounts payables, you have your accrued expenses, okay? And then you can have dividends payable. Then you can talk about your current liabilities, and then you can talk about total liabilities. Now, the next element is equity. You realize that with equity, you don't have any subheading to go in column C. So all you need to do is to jump from B to column E, and then you put in your stated capital, your retained earnings, and then your accumulated comprehensive income. So this will be under something more like IFRS, the total equity, and then total liabilities and equity happens to be the total. So in place, you'll be able to navigate the sections of your financial statements very, very easily in that particular fashion. So that is why we want to encourage the use of separating, defining the column usage, and then following through consistently. Okay, now we've been able to set this one up, and then our title would be in cell A1. So we are going to increase the font size in cell A1 to 20 points. Now, when you increase this to 20 points, automatically you see that the column width will be 26.25. And that's why we set the row height to 26.25. It gives you something thereabouts. So you can take note of that. So we make the heading a little bit bigger from the others. Now, having done this, we are going to apply alignment. So for column C, we've seen that we underlined it. Column D, we are going to apply right align. We are going to do align right. So you go to the home tab. After selecting column D, you go to the alignment group, and then you apply align right. Now, if you go to objective 26. Modify cell alignment. A modified cell alignment. I'll share this with you so that you can follow through. So modify cell alignment. So if you look at this objective domain, modify cell alignment, orientation, and indentation. On the Excel exam, you would be requested to apply alignment. So that is why we are indicating alignment here. Okay, so you go to column D and then you apply align right. Now, this is what align right does. It helps, especially if you are in accounting and finance. You would see that there are instances where you need to add keywords like add, less, and things like that. Okay, so we have product one. So I can put something like plus to guide any person to understand the flow of the logic or the flow of the calculation. Okay, that's why it is right aligned. If you left align it, this text would enter the back of that. So let's do a left align. And then you see that the plus actually goes into column E. So we do align right. And it helps you to add keywords to help people understand the kind of operations or calculations that you are doing. So we've seen how to also modify alignment during this particular course. Now, we are also going to modify the freeze panes. So what does freeze panes do? If you look at objective domain number 11, freeze worksheet rows and columns. Okay, freeze worksheet rows and columns. It's also something that you need to do here. We've covered this. We've talked about that. We've also looked at adjusting row height. So that's what we are going to do. Any particular one that we do, we are going to highlight it to indicate that we've covered it during the objective, during the session. So over here, we are going to freeze panes. So now observe what happens. When I scroll information or when I scroll my spreadsheet, what happens is that I don't see the topmost parts of it. Another thing too is that when I scroll to the right, it makes it very difficult for me to read because the guideline or the first few columns that provides a guide is not in view. Okay, so what we are going to do is to freeze panes. So when you freeze panes, we're going to freeze our panes at cell J5. We're going to freeze our panes at cell at cell J6. So you select cell J6, you go to the view tab, you go to the window group, and then you click the combo box or the drop down here, and this is called freeze pane. What does it do? It keeps rows and columns visible while the rest of the worksheet scrolls based on the current selection. So let's select that. So now look at what happens. Because I have frozen the pane, you see these vertical and horizontal lines appearing on the sheet. When I select the down arrow, you see that columns, rows 1 to 5 always stays at the top. Okay. Also scroll to the right. What happens is that columns A all the way to I are actually kept in view. So we have frozen the panes so that we will be able to read all the other sections of our model. Now, the final thing that we're going to do for today is that we are going to adjust the zoom level. So when you go to the lower right-hand corner of your spreadsheet, you're going to see a zoom slider. Now this zoom slider, okay, helps you to zoom in and to zoom out. Okay, anytime you are doing data entry, you want to see the spreadsheet made a little bit bigger. And then when you are actually, you want to see the scope of the spreadsheet. So you want to reduce the zoom level so that you know your set. And then when you are doing data entry, you want to increase it so that you can enter data more easily. So at this point, we are going to keep the zoom level, we reduce it to 80%, and then we keep it consistent across our financial model that we are creating. And then we are going to see the changes. So on our blank, let's say I'm going to call this one guide because we have some text here that I use to demonstrate stuff. But in our model, we are going to duplicate this. So I am going to copy this sheet to duplicate it in order to replicate the structure across all sections of my model. So I'm going to right click, go to move or copy, and then tick this box, which is create a copy, and then choose OK. This used to be tested on other the other versions of the MOS program, but now we don't have this being tested. We assume that you, the Excel professional, you know how to copy it and then move sheets across a workbook or across workbooks, or within a workbook or across workbooks. So I have just duplicated it. An alternative way is also to hold the control key and then you can drag it. So I click hold and then I move it to this side to move the new sheet that I've created. And I'm going to call this one blank. I press Control A twice to select the entire sheet, and then I hit the delete key. So this is the structure that we have actually created. Okay. I can hold the Control key and duplicate it to create a temp sheet. I can duplicate it again. And then when you do that, you can replicate consistency across your model. So in today's brief session, okay, we started off by looking at our sales and collections budget. And the first thing that we wanted to do was to create a template. Once we have a template in place, we can easily fill in the dots and then follow through consistently across the model. So in the next section that we'll be doing next week, what we'll be doing is that we would actually key in data quickly and then structure our sales and marketing forecast for us to see. Okay. About 12 minutes to go for today. So we'll want to pause here, take a few any clarifications or any Q&As, and then we can end today's session. Because we say we're going to end at 9:30. So we've done enough. Next week we'll jump right into the sales and budgeting forecast and try to complete it. Okay. So what have we done now? If you look at our objective domain, our course outline, we see that we're going to create a financial modeling template. So that's the first thing to do in the sales and budgeting forecast. And we have our budget template in place. We created a folder, we named it, we opened it, we created a spreadsheet. We named it, we opened it, and then we adjusted the column widths, the row heights. We set the global settings for the font type, the font size, and then we also formatted the columns by applying bold and underline, and also change the alignment, making column D align right. Now, we also froze the panes so that when we are scrolling, it scrolls right, and then in the lower right-hand corner, we adjusted the zoom level, and then we have saved changes to it. So with this template in place, we can progressively build our model with the same structure, and then it can speak the same language across. All right, so let me pause